Turn by Mctominay! Lovely cushion header. And Gerrard! What a head, son! What a head!
Hello and welcome back to the second episode of Red Devils Talks, the show where we get to talk all things United once a week. And I'm delighted to be joined by some of my favorite Reds on Twitter. It wasn't really a hard decision because there aren't many that I like, but let's go through them and let's go with the usuals today. And we have Ciaran at the bottom left corner. How are you doing today, mate?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm smashing, mate. I'm smashing. And we've got Pauly as well. He's making his debut. He will also be a regular. How are you doing today, mate?
I'm good. I'm trying to find where the canteen is and everything else. They probably should have wrapped this deal up weeks ago because this is probably going to affect my play.
Look, mate, we don't have that shake money or that oil money, so I'm afraid you're gonna have to bring a packed lunch. Ask the missus. But we're gonna go with Joe as well. My good friend Joe. We've done a lot of podcasts together. How you doing today, mate?
Yeah, good, thanks, mate. Yeah, all good. Just fresh off doing one, actually, aren't we? So, like I said last week, mate, looking forward to letting you do the hosting duties now.
Absolutely, mate. I love the sound of my own voice. And Mark is here as a guest today, and he will be jumping in and out of some of our shows. So, Mark, welcome to Red Devils Talk, mate.
Thank you very much. I love the sound of your voice too, mate. So that makes two of us. Very pleased to be here. Thanks very much, and looking forward to it. Cheers.
No problem at all. And I just want to say to listeners quickly, make sure you just smash the hell out of that like button, because apparently, according to the analytics, if you like a video and you have lots of likes, it gets pushed to the top. So please do that. But look, we're all here about United, the club that we love, and everyone has different opinions. Everyone obviously has different views on the direction we're going, whether the transfer business is going quickly. But I don't want to talk about too many transfer rumors today because, unfortunately, I think we get too caught up in that. And instead of focusing on what we really love is what goes on the pitch and the more important things, we get wrapped up in this soap opera that is transfers every single window. But let's start with an incident probably that isn't going to be one that many United fans wanted to wake up to yesterday. And this was the Mason Greenwood incident. And there's definitely two camps to this view. And look, for me, I always have the view that boys will be boys. And I think that you can't expect 18, 19-year-olds. We all that age once, and we all messed around and did things. I think, unfortunately, they're in the public eye. And I think with obviously the COVID situation, that is blowing everything out of proportion. But I'm going to go to you first, Ciaran, and talk to me about your view on the whole Mason incident. And are people getting a little bit too high and mighty because, like, no one's an angel, are they?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, I think what you said there is correct. With COVID, everything kind of intensifies because even things like earlier on when we just came back, we heard about like Jack Grealish and going out and things like that. And yeah, it's disappointing to hear because, again, it's a mistake that both Foden and Greenwood made. And again, I think they both already come out, apologize, realize like what they did was wrong, especially when it's kind of their first caps for England. It's not exactly the way you want to start off with a manager, but again, they'll learn from it. It's some of them that I saw on Twitter where people were saying they shouldn't be involved with England again, that they've let themselves, their clubs, their country down. Look, they know themselves who they've let down. They know that it'll affect their reputation with some people, but don't get me, like, at the end of the day, the best players are going to get selected. Like, some of the United legends haven't been let's say, don't have the cleanest record. You look at the likes of Roy Keane, Eric Cantona, we all look at them and we say that they're United legends. Just because they get in trouble here and there doesn't mean that we're going to think any less of them. So for me, while it's not exactly the greatest story to come out for a young player, again, they just need to take it on the chin, realize that, not read all the kind of stuff that's going to be written about them over the next few days, apologize to the people that need to be apologized to, and then move on from there.
Yeah, mate, I agree with that. I think you have all the high and mighty, the people that think they've done nothing wrong, and they're the first to comment, the first to jump on it. And look, boys will be boys. I think, Paulie, I'm going to ask your opinion because, look, a lot of people do think this is serious. Some people think this represents an issue, perhaps with the modern day footballer, and some people also think it reflects on Mason and his character, because I've seen a few people say that. Would you agree with that, or is it just simply a mistake?
It's simply a mistake, but it doesn't reflect on his character. This is probably who he is, in terms of he made his England debut. So did Phil Foden. They wanted to go out and celebrate. They're doing the boys will be boys thing, and people are saying, you know, what could they possibly have been thinking to make this decision? I'll tell you what they were thinking. They were thinking, I'm not going to get caught. Because we have all, when we were 18 or 19 years old, done things that we shouldn't have done, and we didn't get caught. And then we did it again, and then we did it again, and then we did it again. And then eventually we got caught once, and depending on how bad it was, would depend on what the punishment was. But, you know, if you had to ring your mom and dad and they said, what in the world were you thinking? You had to come up with some excuse like, oh, I was being dumb, and yeah, I should have thought better. But the reality was, I've done this before and I haven't gotten caught. So why do I think today is going to be any different? And they got caught. Their punishment is they got sent home from the England team. They both had excellent Foden made his full debut last week. Greenwood made his debut, had maybe a chance to be in the starting 11 tonight. They're not. This was an excellent opportunity to get another cap, to really establish themselves in Gareth Southgate's side. You know, you say Greenwood comes off the bench tonight and scores a winner. You know, maybe that is the extra emphasis that Southgate would look for if he doesn't get off to a hot start in the Premier League season. You missed that opportunity, but at the end of the day, that the punishment was minor. The penalty, they understand that. They'll be back in the fold probably by October.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It's just funny, isn't it? Because it's as if a little bit of news and people just want something to talk about. And because they're United players, because they're City players, let's be honest, Greenwood, if he was playing for Villa, no one would be saying, if this was Grealish right now, no one would be saying anything. But the fact it's Greenwood, and obviously he's a special talent. But look, let's move it to a different direction. I'll ask Joe and Mark this. I'll ask you first, Joe. And this summer has been a little bit of a difficult one, I think, for perhaps maybe the hierarchy. When you look at what's happened to Maguire, obviously Lindelof fought for an attacker when they took some granny's purse. You know, there's a few things that have happened this summer, and I think the issue is that there are people out there.
Cape, do they?
What was that?
Heroes don't always wear capes, do they?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's nice to see Victor with a little bit of aggression. Maybe he could transfer some of that onto the pitch. But no, look, I think the problem is that there's a lot of talk. I'm not in this camp, by the way, but there's a lot of talk of this cultural reset. And some people are saying, well, look, we're seeing players do things off the pitch which are not in a great reflection on the club, not in a good light for the club. Obviously, the Maguire incident is something which is ongoing, is a legal thing, but he is the captain of the club. And there are people saying that, you know, Ollie doesn't have a grip on what's going on. My personal view is that when you look at what happens at Man United, I want to see a harmonious squad, you know, in the training ground, on the pitch. Honestly, what goes on outside doesn't really matter to me as much. What happened in international duty doesn't matter to me. That's not Ollie's responsibility. But is it a concern? And should Ollie be concerned at what's going on? Is he managing these players correctly?
I think whether it's a concern or not for Ollie, and it will be, obviously, he'll want his players to act in a responsible manner in an ideal world. Let's be honest, it's absolutely impossible for him to track all of his players and for him to be in control of them all the time, especially, you know, when you consider we've had such a long, arduous season. These players would have been absolutely desperate for a holiday, and they've gone away. You know, they know that they're not probably going to be away for as long as they're normally going to be. So they're just trying to probably cram it all into such a short period of time. I think on Maguire, there's more to that than what meets the eye. And I think obviously we'll hear more about that as this appeal process sort of takes shape. And you know, I think we'll find that actually he may well come out of this, as a bit of a hero, and not a bad name for a hero, Slabhead, to be fair, is it? I'd be happy for my hero to be called Slabhead. I don't think a lot of people are going to mess with
the big S on your top.
Or he headbutts you off the earth or something like that. I don't know. But, you know, so I think he will he'll come out of this good. Mason Greenwood, I think he's probably got less wriggle room in terms of, obviously, what he did was probably a little bit more unnecessary. We don't know yet, but actually my biggest fear for Greenwood moving forward will be if he feels, if this damages his reputation in terms of with the media, because we know that the media can absolutely destroy players' careers if they want to.
Yeah, that's my concern. I think what United have done very, very well is they have shielded Greenwood from the media. We know that, especially the British media. Mark, I want your opinion on this. The British media, they like to build you up, and then anything happens, and they're the first to knock you down. Are you a bit concerned that this might affect Maguire on the pitch? It might affect Greenwood on the pitch. I don't really care about Foden. I hope it does affect him in the nicest way possible because he's a fantastic player. But I'm not too bothered. But are you worried that, our players perhaps are getting targeted because we're Man United?
Absolutely, and I know it's a very, quite a big-headed thing to say, but I do believe that. I think they will bounce back. I think it's going to niggle in their minds for a little while, especially Maguire. He's been, quite frankly, through a very horrific time. So it's absolutely going to have an effect. With Greenwood, he's young. We've all said this. We all make mistakes. It happens. Some we're more proud of than others. Yeah. It's fine. United have got a good enough connection and know what they're doing enough in order to kind of shield them. They've done a terrific job with Greenwood so far. They will do exactly the same when he comes back. And I don't think there needs to be any worries. People make mistakes. And I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with you that, where United are always in the limelight. And I think since Fergie's left, we are now more in the limelight because we have been on a downhill struggle. And at the same time, that works in conjunction quite well with the fact that social media has got bigger and bigger. So it doesn't sort of play and work well together, unfortunately. But I think they'll be fine. We've been through worse. Cantona kicked a fan and got, put sentence and all this. Do you know what I mean? So it's just that it's more in everybody's eyes, and that's just the frustration with it. But we will be fine. They will be fine.
Yeah.
I think we actually do remember. Sorry, Kieran, do you want to add something, mate?
Yeah, just one thing that I forgot to mention there. The other thing that we're not realizing is the fact that Foden and Greenwood, this is the first time that they're actually on like football or money. So think of it when you see just normal people, like when they win the lottery and they go crazy and do things. These kids are 19 and they're having more money than they know what to do with it. So things like this eventually happen. This happens all the time, but it's just because it's in kind of with Twitter nowadays that we hear about this instantaneously. But what you were saying about, is it because of Man United? The same thing happened with David Beckham, where because he was Man United, he was villainized by the British media. It's happened for years. It happened with Rooney as well, and it'll continue to happen. There's always been that bit of bad blood between the media and Manchester United. There's a lot, you could talk about it for hours, but again, it's a common knowledge at this stage. And again, it's just some of the players that come through are just going to have to realize that you have to be careful with what you do, because you will be talked badly against in the media. And that's probably why the club didn't want Greenwood doing many interviews this year.
And real quick, I just wanted to add, trying to bring Ole Gunnar Solskjaer into this is just the most baseless thing in the world. I mean, Maguire gets in trouble on holiday after the Europa League when Solskjaer undoubtedly told the team, take 2 weeks off, don't even think about football, the way that every manager tells you to do that at the end of the season. And trouble happens to find him. It's not like he's a player who has a history of trouble finding him. Trouble found him. We don't know the full story there. The same thing with Lindelof. Then Greenwood gets into a situation where, he's acting like the way 18 to 24-year-old men act. And that can't be on Solskjaer, especially when you look at what happened this season. What was our biggest story off the pitch this season? Paul Pogba danced at his brother's wedding and then wasn't fit to play the next week. Like, this team was models during lockdown all throughout the season. You can't even, you're grasping at straws to try to say, oh, Solskjaer didn't reset the culture here.
I agree. And the problem
can I just add, Ada, in terms of Solskjaer, because obviously you did ask me about Solskjaer as well. In terms of Solskjaer, just this idea that he's changed the culture because this has happened, that it's a slate on him. It's not a slate on him. He's changed the culture in the club and in the dressing room and on the training ground. This is where the point's being made about the change of culture. So I would imagine the Carrington training complex, for example, is a much better place to be now. You know, staff, players, everybody's a lot happier. You know, I would imagine the dressing room on a match day, you know, he's taken a couple of egos out of that dressing room. He's made everyone realise that they're equals. And I think that's where the cultural changes come. He's not all of a sudden made 22, 23 guys angels.
Yeah. Mark, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, just one last thing. I think it's just been a series of unfortunate events that don't look and bode well. And Ollie's not to blame. Like he's completely out of his control. There's always that, you know, it's easy to point the finger, isn't it? And unfortunately, Ollie is going to get a bit of that from time to time. Fergie had it from on occasions. And as I said, things are very different now, so everyone sees everything. That's it.
Absolutely. My last word on this before we move on to the new segment on our show. But what I will say is that I had Jamie Jackson on the other day, you guys know, and he talked in depth because he's writing Ollie's biography. So he's got first-hand access. I mean, what better source to speak to than someone who is literally writing a book with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? And he categorically said that the atmosphere under Mourinho, it was not a happy place. He knows a lot of people that work at United and it wasn't happy. And people forget that although, yes, the football was poor, but there were all our top players wanting to leave. And so for people to come in with the agenda, they're waiting for something to happen so they can say to Ollie, you know, you're the problem. Me and Kieran have had the most ridiculous exchange. There are fans out there that are hoping that Spurs win a trophy. They're hoping that, you know, before United win one, just so they can say, oh, yeah, well, Jose's right. It is just beggars belief. We could talk about that for hours. So I'm going to move on. But look, I've forgotten, guys, who's who, but we've got this new segment on the show, and that's why I've got 4 people on today. So we're going to do a Reguilon versus Telles. Who should we buy? And 2 of the guys, who's doing Reguilon, by the way? Sorry to listeners, I've just forgotten. Okay, cool. And then who's?
I think I'm Upamecano. I'm not sure.
No, don't even do this, man.
maybe invest in a pen.
Yeah, probably. I've got it written down, mate, but I didn't write who. But look,
I have Jimenez.
You got Jimenez. You get removed from the stream in a minute. No, but look, guys, I think the thing is, right, that Man United, obviously, there's frustrations, and I'm not going to go into it because I know me and Pauly will probably have a debate till the cows come home. But, you know, there are frustrations in the United fan base at the moment at probably the speed and efficiency of our transfer dealings. It makes it more difficult when you look over the likes of Chelsea, and obviously City have got a couple through the door, but there are other clubs doing business. And United, we're approaching the first game of the season. We're approaching the deadline, and we're still kind of not being as quick as some people want. But what is positive is just hearing about Reguilon, we're hearing about Telles, 2 very, very good players, in my opinion. 2 players that will offer more than our current options. I don't want to talk about our current options, so that's not going to be on the table because, again, that will spark another debate. But we're looking at what they do offer to the side, and I think it's safe to say that both Telles and Reguilon are better than Williams and Shaw going forward. Their numbers are better. Defensively, that's a debate, but I want to focus purely on both players. And let's start with the Reguilon guys. So that was Mark and it was Pauly. We'll start with you, Mark. Talk to me in a couple of minutes. I'll give everyone a couple of minutes and I'll make the last decision. But why should United sign Reguilon and what would he offer to United? You've got 2 minutes. Go. Hold on, mate. We can't hear you. Are you on mute?
My bad. Sorry about that. I was going to say, I'm pleased that we've got Pauly and I have got Reguilon, because I don't know an awful lot about Telles, in all honesty. For me, we definitely need a left back. I know we've already spoken about this and you didn't want us to go too much into that, but you know, he's good going forward. Defensively, he's okay as well. There's argument that obviously Luke Shaw has done a better job there. But, you know, we need one. I said the other night that I feel that we need to move Brandon over to the right, which to me would make absolute sense. And therefore, we need to be challenging Luke a bit more. You know, we've said for many years he should have cemented his place and he hasn't been able to do that. So Sergio, for me, he looks good. I haven't watched him too much, in all honesty, but, you know, against United, a lot of uproar was being made about him because he did a lot down that left-hand side and made us look silly at times almost. So I think it would be a good acquisition and certainly one for me to go for.
Absolutely. I think he's someone who is probably young enough as well to develop. I think he's someone who has the raw abilities. He fits the profile as well for Ollie. But Pauly, I'll ask you, mate, why should we be signing Reguilon instead of Telles? Go.
Again, I like Mark. I don't know much about Telles, but with Reguilon, it's a simple. We have 1.5 left backs, maybe. We need at least 2. And Reguilon offers more going forward than what Luke Shaw does. At the back, it's a different situation, but we don't ask Luke Shaw to do too much going forward. And what Reguilon could do is, since he does provide more, is he can change the way we play. Slight modifications. Say when we have Reguilon, we're going to play a little, with a little bit more width coming from the left rather than the right. And it just gives teams a different look. It makes us a little bit more unpredictable and allows us to be a little bit more tactically flexible so that you don't exactly know what you're going to get. I think by the end of the season, when we had our first choice 11, if you were a team preparing against us, you knew exactly what you were going to get from us. So any option that gives you flexibility is a good one. We do need someone, and I don't know much about Portuguese football, so this is going to be based on a little stereotyping here. But when we were looking at Bruno Fernandes back in January, and I was watching a lot of Bruno Fernandes, the defending aspect in Portugal did not exactly impress me. So I think Reguilon, coming from La Liga, coming from the Spanish side, is already more defensively with it than Alex Telles would be. And he will need to improve there to gain Solskjaer's 100% trust. But I think both of them would, and Reguilon's probably a step up closer in that direction.
Yeah, well said, mate. I think you make a good point about the Portuguese league, and it's difficult, isn't it? You can see someone on YouTube and look, put Fellaini on YouTube in a 5-minute highlight. It looks like Pele. So, I mean, I think it's a little bit difficult to judge players. For me, I need to watch a player 10 times. That's how I make the judgment. Watch a player 10 times.
It's very difficult to judge leagues to begin with. I mean, Henrik Mkhitaryan came from the Bundesliga and struggled when he first got to England. Bruno Fernandes came from Portugal and did not struggle in the least bit. So, every player is different. It's hard to compare between leagues.
I think if I'm putting Fellaini on YouTube, mate, I'm thinking that I've turned onto the Tree channel by mistake.
Oh, mate, it's the gardening channel, mate. But let's go, Joe. We'll start with you on Alex Telles, because I think early on we've had discussions, obviously, on the transfer show on All for United about Alex Telles. And it's quite clear that his numbers are impressive. But is he the option that we should go for? I mean, he is a little bit older. He is probably someone who, if you're going to think about resale value as well, not someone that will bring much money in. I mean, is he the option we should be going for, or are you obviously thinking maybe Reguilon's better value for money?
Yeah, a few points on this one for me. I'm not claiming to know everything about Alex Telles, because I don't, same as I don't know about Sergio Reguilon either. But what I will say about Telles is that his sort of attacking numbers really impress me. So I can't think off the top of my head, it might have been something like 7 goals, 10 assists last season, something like that. I'm not sure. But I think if you look at all of the top teams around Europe, they've got goals from everywhere. And why not have them from your fullbacks either? But dare I say it, Liverpool, we don't want to talk about them on this show, but, their fullback's going to chip in with goals this season. So I do feel, especially in our team as well, that left back, I do want to see a good output of assists and goals because of doubts over Wan-Bissaka going forward on the right. The other thing I like about Telles as well, he's got probably a little bit more experience that comes with age, experience of playing in the Champions League as well. Obviously, with Porto, the perennial Champions League team, even though they may not go far. But he's got experience of playing against great teams, because they always get a couple of good teams in their group, Porto, because they're usually a pot 3 or pot 4, the 2 teams. So, they're always coming against good sides. And the other thing about Reguilon for me is I just wonder why he's not breaking into that Real Madrid team. You've got Marcelo there playing left back. He's obviously aging now. Ferland Mendy, when I've seen him, I'm yet to be absolutely convinced by him. I know he's French, and that probably goes a long way, obviously, with Zidane being manager. Not saying that there's any favouritism there, but I do, I would like to have probably seen him breaking into that Real Madrid team and playing a bit more for them to be absolutely sold that he's definitely the one for us.
Yeah, good points. I think on the Real point, look, you just have to look at their track record with fullbacks. You look at Hakimi's one of them, and And that's a puzzling one for me as well, because I think Hakimi is probably one of the best fullbacks, in Europe. And to sell him, they may, I believe that he would have been someone that would have done quite well there. But let's move on. And do you share the same concerns about Reguilon and Kieran Telles? For me, do you think that he's more suited because he's probably a bit more experienced? He could slot straight in and make an impact, especially going forward?
Yeah, I think if you bring in Telles, you probably don't have to worry about him this season, because the one thing I see the difference between the two is in terms of the way they play. Both play very attacking styles. They're not the greatest defensively. But the one thing I would say that is a bit different is that Telles is a little bit more physical than you would see Reguilon. So Telles, if you look, he has more upper body strength, which the one thing that is downside there is that he kind of lacks that little bit of acceleration because of it. But at the end of the day, his numbers do speak for themselves. I think he's played in the Champions League, he's played in Serie A with Inter Milan, and at the end of the day, I think it's the last 5 years he has something like 19 goals and 30 odd assists. He's always been an attacking outlet for his team. So again, it probably depends on what you want. Do you want that younger player like Reguilon, who you're going to have years to kind of mold into the type of player you want in whatever system you want to play? Or do you like Telles enough now to see, well, this is the type of player, because he's 27. So he's not going to completely change as a player over the next few seasons. He may adapt based on the team that he's in, but what you see is what you get with Telles. He's been one of the left backs that over the last couple of seasons I've always asked for United to at least go in for him, because he's always seemed to be that next player that could kind of make that move. He kind of reminds me of Pereira that went to Leicester, that even though he played in the Portuguese league, his attacking style suited the Premier League. The fact that Telles is not only attacking but also has that bit of physicality, I think that would suit the Premier League. So I think that's what I would like to go for him. But again, it depends. It's kind of the same thing with that centre back conversation we had last week, is what do you want? Do you want the player that straight away you can play him and he'll play the 36 or 38 Premier League games, or do you want someone that can build on and kind of have a little bit more potential?
Yeah, that's a great answer. Pauly, I'm going to ask you one quick question before I make my decision. There's obviously talks about what's holding up the Reguilon deal is the fact that Real want a buyback clause. And I think, look, for me personally, I said this to Joe earlier, that I have no issues with that, because if you get 2 or 3 years out of him and Real want to buy him back, it suggests to me that he's absolutely killed at United and he's been a great addition. The fans are getting so caught up on something that's just so pointless. It's not something for us fans should worry about. The point is we need to get quality in. Reguilon offers that quality. He's the right age profile. He seems like the right sort of fit for Oli. So is that something United should be concerned about, or should they just get it done because the price is very reasonable?
No, they should have no concern over that, because like you said, if Real Madrid want to buy him back, that means they're paying you a good price, and he's obviously killed it for you for the last 3 years. And whether the buyback clause is a set price or not, you'll be able to reinvest that money into getting a new left back. But most importantly, just look at the last year. I mean, Achraf Hakimi had a fantastic year at Borussia Dortmund, and he was on loan from Real Madrid. They didn't even need to buy him back. They just got him back, and they shipped him off. So with Real Madrid, they're going to, they have Marcelo now. They're just going to be looking for the next Marcelo. So I wouldn't worry too much about them buying a player back.
I want to say something different about that. I think there could be a couple of things there. I think if we are not careful, we could be deemed as a bit of a seller club if we do that. And I know it's only one time, and obviously one time on many is nothing. But also as well, if he does have a really good season for us and they put that in there, he could be worth far more, and they've got a buyback for something minuscule. And that is a problem for me. I think United actually do need to be sensible, and I think that we need to get that out, definitely. Because if as you say, if we're buying him at 23 years old and we want to have a sell-on value, if that is what's going to happen, then we want him to play well. We don't want Real Madrid to have him back, and then we want to sell him for as much as possible.
Joe, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do actually. It's a really good point, and I just think I think we've got something similar with Memphis Depay, haven't we? When we sold him to Lille,
right.
I think we have I think it might even be something like 22.5 million.
First refusals,
Really
they
tiny.
first option, yeah.
You could argue that his form over, he could demand much more than that, but United aren't going to go back there, and that's fair enough. And obviously that's another thing for another day. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. We've talked loads of times, haven't we, about United letting players go on the cheap. But what I'll say about fans losing it about this buyback clause, before social media and before Sky Sports went big on transfers, people didn't even know about things like this in people's contracts. People weren't aware of it. All they get hung up on add-ons and bonuses and things like that and installments. People didn't even know this stuff existed until the advent of social media. So I don't think people need to get themselves too worried. The inner workings of a deal will be what they are, and that will be between the two clubs. And a lot of it we won't even be privy to anyway. We only hear what the clubs want us to hear, obviously.
I just want to respond to Mark one quick. We are not. I mean, we are kind of a selling club in that we don't take the biggest stars. The train from Manchester to Real Madrid typically runs one way, with the exception of Angel Di Maria, and then Reguilon would be the other one. But when we don't really care about sell on. We care about sell on value, but it's not something we're looking to cash in on. Other than with Cristiano Ronaldo, who we knew when we signed him, we'd be selling him on. Everybody else, when we sign them, we're looking to have you for a decade or for a long. So if we're signing Reguilon, we are looking to have him for a long time. And if it does end up costing us millions of pounds because he's been that good that Real want to buy him back, I think that's a risk you're willing to take. But, Memphis Depay, maybe we sold him too soon, but it's not like we had the intention of selling him 3 years later. When we signed Luke Shaw, the intention was let's have him for a decade. Wayne Rooney, we had him, we were never looking to sell him. He had his contract issues, but we weren't looking to cash in on him. So by all means, go ahead. And if you get burned one time, you get burned one time.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. I think, the seller club thing is probably a bit of a moot point for me. You're right, but I'm not saying that we have to sell him. I'm not saying that we buy him with the looking on, moving him on at some stage. My point is if there is a buyback, we are going to massively shoot ourselves in the foot if he has 2-3 terrific seasons.
Can I just say,
move on. Last point.
No, I just want to say quickly, mate, that if we were a team that were ready for success as well over the next couple of years, if he came in and he could be the difference between us winning the league for 2 years, and he did that, helped us win 2 back-to-back Premier League, you wouldn't mind so much. But actually, if he comes in now, this club's probably not ready to win the league, in all honesty, in 2 years. So he comes in, he doesn't help us achieve what we want to achieve, and then he goes again, and we're back to square one, and we're in this position where we were 2 years ago.
That's a good point. And guys, I've got to move on to obviously the next one. But my decision, the judge is going to make the decision. The man with the iron fist. I'm going to say, honestly, I'm going to go for Reguilon because I just think that, although I'm a massive Telles fan, but I just think that he fits the profile. I think he's got a bit more about his game. He's got a higher ceiling, although I think you could argue that Telles will come in and offer that end product straight away. But I just think that for the money being touted, I think he fits the profile. It's a young squad, young starting 11. He can grow with them, and I'd be happy to sign him. But okay, guys, let's move on to the next one. And our second head-to-head is going to be Fred versus Mctominay. No, the reason why I'm talking about this, and this is probably not going to happen. So before the listeners complain, oh, this is not going to happen. This is just a little bit of fun, and it's good to get an opinion from the fans because I think there's 2 camps that they sit on. I think there's some that think McTominay is I've got a fly flying around. But everyone thinks McTominay is absolutely phenomenal. He's going to develop into such a great player, and he's got United through and through. And I just think that's probably quite a short-sighted view. And then there's others with Fred obviously potentially being linked to Galatasaray. If Thiago comes in, we won't talk about Thiago this week, but we might talk about him if he signs. So that'll be a fun one. A Thiago special, Pauly. I can't wait for that one. So there's obviously the other campers that no, we got to keep Fred because Fred's probably got more quality on the ball. He's played better this season. He's more established. You could argue perhaps McTominay won't even get to Fred's level. So, look, there's 2 sides of the camp, and let's start with the Fred side of the camp. And who's on the Fred side? Because I've forgotten again, guys. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Actually, we'll start with McTominay this time because we started Fred. Okay, let's go, Kieran.
I think
let's go, Kieran.
Never mind. No,
Who are you? Let's go, Kieran. McTominay. Why should United keep McTominay and loan out Fred if that situation occurs?
Honestly, it's a hard one to say. For me, McTominay does represent what the club has always been about. Is yes, it's important to bring in players for the first team, but also you need to circumvent that with players coming through the academy. We had that before when the likes of Darren Fletcher came through, John O'Shea came through. They're not going to be kind of those top players that you're looking to play every single game. But as I usually call them, kind of glue players. So they bring everything kind of together. Not everybody can be that superstar. We have to remember there's not every single year that we have a team that's just full of Galacticos. In debating Fred versus McTominay, who had the better season last year? Yeah, most people will say Fred. But then the season before, Fred was woeful. So you have to think of, well, is it just because Solskjaer's come in and Fred's played well last year? And what's going to happen for the next season? Is it going to be now that Van de Beek comes in, Pogba's going to be playing, Bruno's going to be playing? What is that going to leave Fred with? Is he going to be as motivated to continue kind of his trajectory that we saw this season? For me, McTominay, you'll always see him try his best for the club. Well, he needs to be developed. It's very obvious that his positioning's not where it needs to be yet, and that's why you saw him not play many games towards the end of the season, because they're trying to build him into the kind of Matic role, but he doesn't have that positioning sense yet. For me, though, if you're talking about one of them leaving, yes, I would like to see McTominay get some game time, but if it was me and one leaving the club, I would prefer it if somebody came in for an offer for Fred that actually was a good enough one that we would let him go. Both players for me need to be there anyway, because the more options you have, the better it is for the club, because it takes one or two injuries and then they're playing Andreas Pereira again. For me, both players are ahead of that. They're ahead of where Lingard is. And for me, both should be staying. But if you're choosing one or the other, when I look back to see what are Manchester United all about, it's bringing in those kind of first-team players, but also circumventing that and developing the players coming through the system that have played in that system for years. So that's why I would want to keep McTominay.
Yeah, some great points. Do you agree with that, Joe? Well, obviously you will do, because you're going to say McTominay. But look, one thing I will say about McTominay, and this is something that I worry about, is that he didn't play many games. And I think Ollie didn't rotate the squad well enough after the restart. And look, we know that he doesn't really think there's much quality there, but we played our players into the ground. You look at the way Bruno was by the end, and it's ridiculous because people were complaining about Bruno, saying, oh, he's not good enough. You just seen an international break. A well-rested Bruno is going to be a phenomenal asset next season. He's going to be better. But there's a worry for me that McTominay, I know he's young, he's got to develop, but he's one of those that he needs a run of games to get up to his top form, but he ain't going to get that in that midfield because he's not good enough right now, or he might never be good enough.
No, I think it's interesting, but I think he fell out of favour a little bit, didn't he, after the restart, strangely as well. I don't know if that's because, like Kieran says, he's adapting to a new position at the moment, and Solskjaer there was so much on the line for United this year getting top four. I don't know if Solskjaer felt he could trust him in that crucial CDM role. You say there about it takes a few games to get up and running, and when he comes into the team, he doesn't always hit the ground running. I think the same with Fred. I think when Fred's been out of the team for a while, he seems to take 4 or 5 games to get up to speed. His touch seems to be off. His passing range isn't quite right. Once he's had a run in the team, he gets better. Like towards the end of the season, he got better for us at the latter stage of the Europa League. He was starting to find his game again just before the season finished. So that's interesting. But yeah, I just think with Scott, it's again, Kieran's already made the point, but it's his versatility as well. I mean, he can play CDM. I can see him playing centre back as well eventually in this team. I can see him being able to drop back and be able to play centre back if we play 5 at the back, or even in a 2 centre backs. And actually, you look at where he started out in the academy. I can't remember what season it was. Kieran knows a bit more of the academy than me, but he actually spent a whole season in the academy playing centre forward. Because United had one. It was a season when Rashford broke into the first team, because that Rashford obviously came out of that under-23s team because he needed to. McTominay played a striker for the second half of that season, and he could do a job there as well. And, you're thinking late in the game, he's got a big presence, tall lad. I think he really could be the next John O'Shea, because literally we saw John O'Shea play in every position. Maybe not going to see him as a fullback, Scott, but definitely down United's spine, and even in goal maybe if we needed to at some point. So, yeah, I think it's the versatility that does it for me with Scott.
Yeah.
Good points, mate. Good points. Go on, Kieran.
The other thing is, I just feel like no matter what it is, both Fred and McTominay, none of them are going to be that kind of starting player over the next kind of year or two, in my opinion. So then you have to think of, well, what job can they do? If we were winning a game and there was 5 minutes left, who do you want to bring on to kind of shore up the game? For me, it's going to be McTominay, because often when I see Fred on the ball, sometimes it's great, but then he can be a bit of a liability when it comes defensively. I've seen him give it away just when he's gotten the ball from the back line, and then we've been under pressure. When McTominay has it, he doesn't go for that kind of killer pass. He's more controlled on the ball. I think he's more aware defensively than Fred is, and that's kind of why, if I was saying as a squad player, I think McTominay is probably a little bit more important in terms of the scenarios when he's brought on.
Interesting points. Let's move on to the Fred section. We'll start with you, Mark. I know Pauly's a big fan, but I haven't heard your views on it, so I'm really keen to listen. But you look at Fred, and surely Ollie playing Fred in the semi-final Europa League in that defensive midfielder position suggests that Fred's probably higher up in the pecking order. It's debated where Fred's best at. I think when you look at Fred, there's arguments that he could play in that defensive role. I think he could be quite good at it. But my issue with him, both of the players actually, is I don't think they have that positional awareness that Matic has. They don't have that discipline. And that's so key for that position. Do you think that Fred is more likely to go because, one, he's older, you could probably fetch more money, and two, because he probably, it sounds really silly, but he's not a local lad, and he's McTominay, you need some of those around? Or do you think that actually it's a case of Fred's a better player, and if United are looking to ship someone out, it has to be McTominay?
Yeah, I think they were both very unfortunate, really. I think Fred really come into his own at the beginning of the season, and as many people have pointed out, the more games he gets, the better on the eye he is, really. I think what you get with Fred over McTominay is I think I'd be more... I find Fred a little bit more reliable. I think with giving the ball away, I think Fred sometimes in certain games, even in the Europa League, he was pretty good, and he was able to hold the ball well, was able to dictate a little bit. And with McTominay, I think he's still young. He's got a lot to learn. It's that balance, isn't it, of being too young but needing some game time, and then being old enough and a bit more experienced. But it doesn't always work in all regards, if you see what I mean. For me personally, I like them both, and I think it would suggest, as someone else mentioned, Ollie using Fred in the latter stages of Europa does suggest to me that he is higher on the pecking order, and I think when you pay £52 million or whatever it is for a player like that. I guess sometimes it forces your hand a little bit to do so. But I think he can be better on the ball, and I would be a little bit more sceptical and worried for McTominay to hold the back and to keep hold of possession. Yeah,
it's good points there, and that's something I want to ask you, Pauly, about that price tag. Look, we all know that players don't choose their price tags. We look at Harry Maguire; he's solely judged on that price tag. If he was a 40-50 million pound player, I don't think he would get as much stick and criticism, and the microscope wouldn't be on him as much as it is. But do you think when you spend 50 million on a player, you got to see more, haven't you, from Fred? You've got to see a player that is pushing Pogba, Matic. You look at Matic. Matic is probably the most important player in that midfield for me. I know we've got great creative players, but when Matic doesn't play, United don't keep clean sheets. They don't win as many games. Surely a player like Fred, who's cost 50 million, he should be pushing Matic way more for that starting position.
Yeah, and he kind of got screwed. He's the 52 million coming from Shakhtar Donetsk. I don't think I'm making any bold statements here to say that none of us really watched Shakhtar Donetsk, and I don't know how much we watched them in the Champions League, but when we heard 52 million for Fred, our response was probably, who? And then you look up his numbers, and he actually had a pretty good offensive season before joining us, but he is not even close to a Jose Mourinho type midfielder. And he comes to Manchester, which is not an easy place for a Brazilian to adapt. It was Fernandinho of Manchester City who helped him to adapt. So it's not surprising, given that, you know, he doesn't fit the mold of the manager. He's not settling in well into the city, into life. And then there's a managerial change. It's not so crazy that he had a bad first season. And I actually thought he came on pretty well at the end of the season. I thought against Manchester City, he was fantastic. With about like 3 games left, he was fantastic defensively and had a lot of interceptions, won the ball back a lot. And then I said, you know, the problem was he won the ball back and then he just gave it back to a blue shirt. So, you know, he was only half the job was done, but then the other half needed to improve. And this year it really improved. And it would have been foolish to write someone off after 1 year, but this year he improved, and he really has become the type of player that Ander Herrera became last year. Not so much the type of player that Ander Herrera was supposed to be, because Ander Herrera has a lot of ability going forward. Fred, less so. Fred can't shoot. He can't hit the side of a barn door, which is infuriating. But put him next to Matic, and he can be the guy like Herrera who runs around in the midfield, breaks up your attack, your counterattacks, or slot him next to Pogba, and he can play next in that defensive role. He has the positioning down pat. It's just that Matic is a big guy. Fred isn't. So when he does that, when he drops deep, they have to kind of hide him. And we've seen them do that on long goal kicks. Fred will drop back to center back. Maguire will step up into midfield and win the header, and then they'll switch back. Or Luke Shaw will do the same. So there are modifications that have to be made when you play him. But McTominay, everybody keeps saying, oh, he's being molded to that DM role. Solskjaer never plays him as the DM. He plays Fred as the deepest midfielder when Fred plays next to McTominay. He plays Pogba as like a half and half. Against Crystal Palace, McTominay finally started to drop deep after the water break. He started to do his role properly. And from the water break until halftime, he looked like a completely different player. But then in the second half, the original McTominay came back. And when Matic came in, the game changed. And you were like, oh, right, this is what can happen. So when you have Fred next to McTominay and you're relying on McTominay to be that Paul Pogba type role where he's shuttling back and forth and progressing the ball, it doesn't happen because McTominay doesn't have the passing ability to do that. And that looks like a mark against Fred. And then when Fred comes back into the team after the restart, but he's playing when he's playing next to Matic, now he's playing that Pogba role, and you're comparing him to Pogba. And Fred's not Pogba. Nobody's Pogba. So it makes it very hard to say, well, why isn't he nailing down this role when he's never really had the chance to nail down that role, with the exception of out in the Europa League at the end of the campaign where he's playing next to Pogba. But we all say, oh, McTominay, like, you need those players from the club that are developed from the academy. That's not enough of a reason to keep him. Marcus Rashford is from the academy and loves the club. Mason Greenwood has that. Harry Maguire transferred in, but already embodies what the club does. Bruno Fernandes has been here for 5 minutes and already embodies the club, to the point that half the fan base is saying he should be the captain. Harry Maguire already is the captain. A year ago, we needed that because we had the likes of Alexis Sanchez and Romelu Lukaku and a bunch of other players that didn't want to be here. We needed that spirit in the team. Now we have that spirit, and that comes from the leaders on the team. It's about ability, and if you don't have the ability, then you're going to be found out. And right now the team is progressing more than McTominay is.
I am
fantastic.
11 players that absolutely adore and love the club aren't going to get you titles either, is it?
Exactly, 100%.
Yeah, but
that's the problem.
That's not the.
Go on, Kieran. Kieran, go first.
Yeah, that's not the point. Especially when I was saying about circumventing with the academy players. Yeah, it's all great that you don't want just 11 academy players starting for the team, but that's not it. It's a squad game now. You can't play the same 11 every single game. Not every club can go out and do what Chelsea are doing now and buying a new starting 11 and then just having the rest of the players in there. Ferguson always said it was John O'Shea the best centre-back, left-back, centre midfield. No, but why did he play? He was reliable. He knew what his job was. He wasn't the most talented footballer. If you had 11 John O'Shea, you weren't winning anything. You're probably getting relegated. Same thing with Darren Fletcher.
How dare you?
Yeah, but it's
Darren
true.
Fletcher, the team didn't drop off in performance when he played.
It did when he first came in.
Performances.
No, when Darren Fletcher first came in, he rarely played for the team, but he had to be developed. The difference was we had players like Paul Scholes in there, so he had a chance to get the system. But right now, before McTominay got injured this season, he was probably one of the players that was holding that team together. One
question, Kieran, I'm going to ask you. One question. Yeah. Honestly speaking, Darren Fletcher is a player that is actually quite disrespected because he isn't a flashy name. He isn't a Brazilian, but Darren Fletcher was a very, very good player. He was excellent technically. Yeah. He dragged us to the final. Well, he was phenomenal. He got banned for the final in 2009 when obviously we got completely outplayed by Barca in Rome 2-0. But Darren Fletcher was a very, very technically gifted footballer.
Yeah,
McTominay doesn't show those sort of attributes. You can't just suddenly. I know you're young, but Mason Greenwood's a young player, but he's so technically gifted. Brandon Williams is a young player. He's not technically gifted. Rashford's a young player. He's good technically, but he's not technically gifted. You don't just suddenly learn it. You either have it, you don't. You learn, obviously, decision-making, calmness, that sort of composure to your game, but you can't teach someone to be more technically gifted. McTominay hasn't shown anything to me to suggest. He used to be a striker. It doesn't look like he's that great in front of goals. He scored a few goals. He's not good enough to play defensive midfielder because his passing range isn't wide enough. He's good in midfield, but again, if he's playing number 8, he needs to have more attacking prowess and more vision and more incisive passing. So, I mean, I'm asking you, look, it's just playing devil's advocate. And then after this, I'm going to go to jokes. We've got to move on. We've got just under 10 minutes left. Yeah. But can you ever see McTominay ever going to that level of Darren Fletcher?
Yeah, because I think the difference between McTominay and some of those players that you mentioned is the likes of Greenwood, Rashford, even to a certain extent Darren Fletcher, is that they played those positions all throughout the academy. The difference with McTominay is he used to be a small player and then suddenly grew within a couple months and had a completely different body type and then had to learn a new position. That can be difficult if you're used to playing in one spot and you have a certain body type and this is part of your game to now I can't remember how much it was, whether it was 5, 6, 7 inches that he grew, and you have to completely adapt your game. So he's had to learn from the fly. Like, really, I think he was probably put into the team a little bit too early by Mourinho. He probably needed a bit more time in the academy, being able to kind of stay in that kind of central midfielder, defensive mid position, learn what is expected. But the problem is, I think he was kind of forced in. Jose probably made people want to have McTominay playing all the time when he wasn't ready for it. Right now, I feel like it should be that point where he should be behind the likes of Pogba, Matic, and he should be taken from it. With Darren Fletcher, when he started his career at United, he wasn't the same player that we saw dragging the team into the Champions League, but he clearly learned from the likes of Michael Carrick, Paul Scholes. And if the one thing that you can say is with Carrick being on the backroom team, that can only benefit McTominay. Yeah, it'll probably take time, but going back to my point at the start, I think both Fred and McTominay need to be part of the squad. But again, they're probably going to be used in different scenarios. Like Pauly said, they play a bit different positionally. The reason why I think people will ask McTominay to play more defensive-minded is because they know Pogba and Bruno are going to play the majority of the time. And now with Van de Beek in there, there's not going to be much room for players further forward in midfield to get that much game time. So you're going to see Fred and McTominay probably share some of the minutes when Matic isn't playing.
Yeah, go on, Joe. Last point, then we got to move on to the last question. Go on, Joe.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've just wanted to add to what the guys are saying, really, just saying that, I mean, obviously I've been fighting McTominay's corner on this one, but it's nothing to do with the fact that he's a United Academy product, should I say. That can't cloud your judgment at the end of the day. We need to be a club that's winning, and therefore we need to be having players in the team, in the squad, that are going to win us titles. So obviously I want us to keep having academy players in there. It's part of what we are, but we cannot rely on them in order just to think that they're just going to make it and winners things just because that's what the dream is. And the comparisons with Fletcher are really interesting because I remember when Darren Fletcher was first coming through, I remember watching MUTV in the early days, and everyone said this might be the actual next David Beckham. He played as a right winger, I think, in the reserves in the academy, and everyone was saying what a wonderful right foot he'd got. And, you want to watch this guy, he's going to be whipping balls in for the next 10 years. I don't know if he ever did play right wing for the United first team at any point, but I mean, obviously, we all remember him changing himself into a brilliant central midfielder, very underrated player. And obviously, that's probably a bit of a process that Mctominay is going through now. Probably a bit easier, his process, because I mean, there's a lot of difference between right wing and centre midfield. Although maybe David Beckham might argue, but but there is a bit of a difference. But I do feel that McTominay is going through that change, and actually, if he could nail it as a CDM moving forward, that could save United a lot of money as well, because in the next season or two, they are going to have to look at replacing Matic. I might have even been looking to do it this summer as well, to be honest.
Yeah.
He could be a player that, for whatever you think of him, it might actually save the club some pounds, because CDMs are going to continue to be really sought after players over the next couple of years, because teams need protection for defences, because there's not a lot of great defenders out there. So there's going to be more and more weak defences around. So I think CDMs are going to only get more important in the next few years. Yeah,
guys, I need to make obviously a choice, and it looks like Martial's just scored. I mean, that's great to see. He's had a phenomenal season, and he deserves all the success he's getting, and I'm so happy to see him back in the national side. But my decision, look, this is so hard, but just to say to listeners, firstly, smash that like button, because I haven't said it for a while, and hit the subscribe, because we're going to be on every week and we're going to be arguing about everything to do with United. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to be
doing that. If you choose red on this one, Haider, I'm going, mate, because that's 2 hours.
No, look, my opinion on this, look, it's a bit of fun, but I don't want to see either of those players go, because they both offer something to the squad. What they offer is they offer that work rate, tenacity, energy, and attitude. Both of them are very good professionals, and I want players like that around the squad. But if one had to go, look, there's Pereira and Lingard that are going to go before, but I'd have to say McTominay needs a loan. He's young. He just needs to develop. Sorry, Joe. But Fred's more sort of ready-made. He's shown more ability in that defensive midfielder role, which is where I think both players will probably look to operate. And I just think that McTominay has time. If Tottenham offered 40 million, which was reported, it's probably rubbish. I honestly would sell him. I'm sorry to say. And we've got Hannibal in the academy. We're not going to talk about this anymore, guys. I'm going to give you 30 seconds now, but that's probably my decision. But
to be fair, if Tottenham offered us 40 million for Fred, I'd sell him as well.
Yeah, I probably would as well. But guys, look, okay, last question. You're going to have 30 seconds each. It's just a quick, do you think Jadon Sancho is going to sign? And would you take Gareth Bale as an option if he didn't? So we'll go around. We'll go Mark first, then Joe, then Pauly, then Ciaran. Mark, yes to Sancho signing, and would you take Bale if he did?
Yes to Sancho. I think it's gone too far now. I think the club will have huge amount of egg on their face if they don't do it, and they know that. I honestly believe, we're getting frustrated. It will happen, and I hope it happens. I hope I'm not wrong. Gareth Bale, no, I wouldn't. I think that there are other potential right wingers that are younger, more hungry. We have to go on the basis of the last couple of years. I feel that he's not really as interested in his game as what he was. So no, for me.
Yeah, well said. And Joe, quickly, yes to Sancho and yes to Bale?
Sancho, no. Overrated, overpriced. And I don't think he broke any day of the week. No, definitely Sancho. Gareth Bale, no, not for me. My big concern with Gareth Bale is the injuries. Mark makes a good point. I think he's lost a bit of interest in the game, love of the game as well. I think that is a good, solid point. But the other thing that I'd have a concern about as well is his ego coming into the dressing room. I just feel he's the type of character, especially if he tries the Real Madrid sulking, and there's a lot of rumours at Real Madrid that he doesn't get involved in the social things and he keeps himself to himself. He's the type of player that could come in and upset the rhythm in that dressing room, and that's something that I'm concerned about, a little bit like Sanchez did.
Well said. Pauly, I think I know your decision on Sancho, but would you take Gareth Bale?
I would take him on the same kind of loan that Bayern Munich continue to manage to pull off from everybody, like Ivan Perisic, all these players that teams don't want, and Bayern Munich manages to get them on loan for a year. if we could not get Jadon Sancho for another season, and we told Real Madrid, if you pay 70% of Gareth Bale's wages, we'll take him. And we spoke to Gareth Bale first. He has to pledge that commitment. There is the chance, he wants to play regularly ahead of the Euros next year. His manager at Wales is a United guy. So if he's going to walk in and he's going to be on board and be committed, and we could get a very good financial arrangement, like Real Madrid taking 70% or something of his wages, then by all means take him on a 1-year loan, bridge that gap, get yourself a right wing that can be there along with Mason Greenwood and some extra dynamicism. And for those that don't know, I always said Jadon Sancho would probably sign around the end of this international break. I expect it to start getting pushed through tomorrow. And at the end of the day, I also expect him to play in Dortmund's DFB Cup match next week, and then he'll be a United player before the Crystal Palace match.
Breaking news.
Pauly, this is gonna be the short clip when I release it tomorrow of you saying that, and I'm gonna say to everyone, "Not good speak." No, I'm kidding. Okay, look, guys, we've got to quickly go. We've got to have Kieran's last word. Kieran, what are your thoughts on Sancho and Gareth Edward Bale? That's not his name. I just guessed.
Yeah. I would say Sancho is one that it has to happen at this stage. There's, like Joe said, at this point, it's gone so far down the line that you would expect that if the deal was going to be so difficult to get done, that we probably would have pulled out by now and the club would have put some sort of leak out. The fact that they haven't, I think that they have it. There's a real possibility it happens. In terms of Gareth Bale, for that picture about his hair alone the other day, I think he deserves to get a chance to go into the room. A couple of players might be able to grab some of that, but I think, again, like what Pauly said, the fact that Giggs is his manager at Wales, if Giggs says his attitude is good, if you're able to get him on a deal similar to what Ivan Perisic went to Bayern Munich for, there's no reason why I wouldn't do it. It might also be a little bit of a help for the likes of Dan James, who's used to playing with him in the national team as well. So again, if we can't get Sancho and if there was a possible loan option, I think Bale would be the first person I would probably look at that has the quality that we're looking for. But obviously, number one and foremost should be Sancho, and we should be doing everything to try and bring him in.
Completely agree. I think everyone completely agrees. Guys, we've got no more time. But what I will say, the last point is Duncan Castles has just said today in Emma Gary on their transfer podcast that what is actually holding up the Sancho deal is the bonuses in Sancho's contract. So that's very positive. I think. That's what you were saying. And that's what Jamie Jackson said, the agent sort of fees. And it kind of goes against what Fabrizio Romano said. Look, there's two camps to everything. Joe, I can't get you to make one last point.
I just thought we had Louis van Gaal on the pod, mate. Here and talking about pulling hair, a bit of mechanism. There's what.
Look, we'll be back next week hopefully next week we'll have Sancho and maybe even Thiago, so we can all go in on Pauly about Thiago. I'm only kidding. But look, guys, the listeners, look, this is going to be a weekly thing throughout the season, and it's going to be great fun. These are such good fans, all of you guys. Such great points. And look, make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and be here with us every week. And if we get loads and loads of following for this, we're going to do weekly live shows so you guys can interact with us. Thank you, guys.